I've always been a firm believer in change, and throughout my life, I've worked hard to change the things around me. However, there was a time in my life where I forgot to change the most important thing, myself. And today, I'll be sharing with you my moment of change. I was 20 years old, I had just graduated from college, and I was eager to start my career. Like any job hunt, I faced several rejections. However, there was a promising opportunity. After finalizing 3 interview stages, I had a gut feeling that this was it. I went to that interview that day, certain that I was going to sign a contract. I walked into the manager's office, and the first thing he asked me, "Do you always wear your veil like that, Ms. Haidar? What about your clothes? Could you shorten them a bit?" I didn't understand the question. I was puzzled, and I looked at him. I was like, "Excuse me, is this part of the job interview? Is this one of those tricky questions?" And he finally told me, "Esraa, if you want this job, you're gonna have to change the way you dress." I was shocked. I was facing discrimination because of my veil. I rejected the position and left the office that day. And I will never forget how I felt. The feeling of anger, the feeling of pain, the feeling of being alone and helpless. I couldn't understand how by simply having a piece of cloth over my head, I was less qualified. And you'd think that at a moment of such frustration, I was going to do something about it. But the truth is, I didn't. I was scared. I continued my job search, eventually found a job, and yes, the discrimination continued. Whether it be through clients avoiding me or people's facial expressions, I had to live with discrimination every single day. It wasn't an easy journey, and I always thought to myself, this is how it's going to be. I'm going to have to live with this day by day, and change was not an option. A year and a half ago, I was a social media class, and we were introduced to the world of blogging. In one of the assignments, I was asked to start a blog about any topic that we wanted. And the first thing that came to my mind was the feeling I had when I left that manager's office. I was inspired. I got a piece of paper and started to write down all of the ideas, all of the things that I wanted to share with the world. And I rushed home that day and I started my blog called Hijabi. I wrote my first post and I sent it out to the world. And as soon as I pressed enter, I had a moment of freedom, a moment of liberation. I had decided to speak up, and I realized that change was an option. I started Hijabi as a platform in order to discuss the stereotypes and the discrimination that veiled women faced in Lebanon and in our society. I realized that my story was one of many. Many women who had decided not to speak up, many women who were afraid, and many women who believed that there was no hope. I also realized that part of why we were facing discrimination as veiled women was because simply the other didn't know who we were. I started to share stories of what it's like to be veiled in Lebanon and answer the simple, silly questions like, "Don't you get hot wearing all those clothes during the summer? And what's up with Ramadan? What do you guys do in that?" I started to answer these questions. And with more than 5,000 readers from around the world, I thought I was successful. I had broken all stereotypes. Mission accomplished. Boy, was I wrong. While writing a post asking readers not to discriminate against veiled women, I received a very interesting email from a young woman who was non-veiled, a young woman who was living in a society of veiled women and was facing discrimination. In her email, she described how simply because she was different, not like the crowd, didn't wear the same clothes, didn't have a headscarf, she was treated indifferently. She described her feelings of pain and anger and anxiety and of being alone, the same feelings that I had. And at that moment, I realized that discrimination has no favorites. And what's more important is that I realized that I myself had been discriminating against non-veiled women. Whenever there was a group of people in any occasion, I would quickly rush to those who were like me, those who were veiled. And it suddenly hit me that all this time I had been telling people not to discriminate against veiled women when I myself was doing it. I went home that day and wrote a post titled "Confessions of a Veiled Woman," where I apologized to every single person I had ever labeled or judged. And after that post, my blog, Hijabi, was no longer about veiled women. It became a platform for fighting stereotypes of all kinds. Whether you're old or black or white or tall or fat or skinny, this was the place to talk. And at that moment, I realized that change was possible. I started Hijabi thinking it was about me, thinking it was my problem, thinking I'm the victim. Oh, it's because I'm veiled that I didn't get this job. And the truth is, I simply wasn't qualified enough. I was victimizing myself, and I knew that there were other girls who were doing the same. And through my blog, I told them to stop. Blogging has allowed me to have a voice. And when you share your voice with the world, you're bound to hear both the positive and the negative remarks. And the only way that we as human beings can really grow is through listening. Listening to our similarities, listening to our differences, and most importantly, listening to our hearts. It hasn't been an easy journey. And when I look back, I see a young, frightened woman who lived in fear. A woman who believed that change was not possible. And today, I stand amongst you, empowered, simply because I decided to speak up. Because I decided that I was no longer going to live in fear. Remember that no matter how old or young or helpless you may feel, remember this: change is always an option. Thank you.